Good evening. Start by opening the meeting. The selectmen are all present. We'll start with transmitting of Treasury warrants 33, 33A, 34, and 34A.
Move the warrants as read by the chairman.
Second?
Motion made and second. All in favor? Unanimous. We have no minutes to approve. We'll start with our 7 o'clock appointment with Dana Burnham, President, and members of the Board of Directors of Wilmington Farmers Market Association to come here to talk about the renewal of license and to conduct a farmers market on town property. Good evening.
So the main purpose is to renew our license, but we had renew our license for the site that we had last year. But we're also hoping to have a longer season this year, and we gave some dates. And we're also hoping to shift the market to an earlier time. And we also provided times, but all of these things we're willing to hear what your recommendations are on that.
Okay. Any report or anything how it worked out last year? I know you've been in.
Well, the main thing that we noticed from being at the market was that probably around 1:30 or 2, the market was open 12:30 to 3:30, and I would say from 2 o'clock on there was a big drop-off in attendance. There was lines starting at 12:30. People would line up to get into the market, and we tried to hold people off until opening bell, figuring that that's how markets run and that's the fairest way to do it. But we did have lines for about the first, I would say, half hour at the different stands, and then it would kind of even out. But the traffic definitely fell off, I would say, 1:30 or 2. So eventually, we started letting our vendors, we would let them pack up at 3 because there really was no business from 3 o'clock on. And then a lot of our feedback on our customer survey was that, and even just talking to people at the market, was that they would rather come to the market in the morning time frame so that then they could have their Saturday afternoons to themselves. A lot of people told us, I wanted to come, but we have plans for the afternoon, so
Sunday
it doesn't,
afternoons.
Sunday afternoons. So what we'd ideally like is the same 3-hour block of time, but shifted earlier. But we do want to take into account, we know there's, different church services going on, so we didn't want to interfere with traffic that way. So that's one request. And then the other request is that we start the season earlier. We're hoping for June 17th and extend into September, and we're hoping for September 30th. We had a lot of requests during the market. When the market closed the first weekend in September, a lot of people would say, "Why are you closing now? All the fall vegetables are coming." So we'd like to take advantage of the fall produce season.
Okay.
But like I said, we
No,
know.
when you originally first came in, those were the hours that you had worked on after the first year? Or?
No, I think those are the hours suggested by the Board of Selectmen. We were willing to go with whatever your recommendations were.
Okay, we talked about the church services in that area.
Right.
Any questions or comments from the board?
I really don't have an issue with that as long as, manager's here every day. If there's not a conflict, I don't have a problem opening at 10 o'clock. I know it's been a very success venture, and I've heard a lot of good positive things. I was down there I couldn't go to the grand opening, but I did make it a point to go down there a couple of times. And it was really fascinating, it was interesting, and I had a good time. And I support what you want to do. Thank you.
Mr. Ellis?
My inclination is to handle it in the similar way that we did last year, and insofar as we wanted to give the group the chance to, to do what they thought would be successful, and to have a wait-and-see approach as far as any prospective problems that might come up. So I'm certainly one of the people who had pointed out last year that historically we've tried to stay away from activities on Sunday mornings. They accommodated that request, and they're coming to us with a reason for changing that. So I'm inclined to go with that and to give them a chance to operate those hours, understanding that if history shows that we were the town probably did things the way they should have, and if we have church groups coming to us where there's a conflict, then we'll have to take another look at it again next year. But I'm just inclined to try and work with this group, within reason, and hope that it's successful and adjust going forward.
Any questions or comments on that?
Yes, actually, last time when you had come in, you did an excellent presentation. Certainly, this summary description here is excellent as well. Certainly would echo some of the points that the other selectmen have made. I've continued to receive positive feedback out in the community. I've had some general questions posed to me from various people in many different circles, asking some general questions about do you have or do you intend to have any gluten-free or allergy-free products?
I think there's somebody here tonight who actually has a licensed kitchen that produces gluten-free
Okay.
products. So that's definitely something we think would be worthwhile to bring to the market.
Okay. The other thing is that can you give me just a sense how you go about it? I'm anticipating that as you continue to grow, people wanting to participate with you is going to continue to grow as well. So can you tell me a little bit about how you select the vendors that are able to actually be part of the farmers market to make sure that you have ample selection, but you don't get too off the goals and objectives?
That's exactly what we do, is that we set targets for what we want for what particular vendors, and actually once we know what our season parameters are as far as time and length of the dates of the season, then we'll reach out to different vendors. But before we do that, we will set targets for we want this many farmers, we want this many produce farmers, we'd like one grass-fed beef farmer, we'd like our seafood vendor from last year to return. One thing that we were lacking last year was artisan cheese vendor, so we're going to try and set that target. We'd also like a free-range poultry vendor, so we'll set our targets, and then 2 bakeries like we had last year seemed to really work, and then other sort of specialty food vendors, we'll rotate them through.
Okay.
So that's how we plan it.
And I wouldn't want this comment or question to be taken out of context. It's just seeking to understand is that it is a Wilmington farmers market, and obviously a lot of the vendors come from outside. But say that there is a, Wilmington business, if you will, or a Wilmington entity that expressed interest, and it is a Wilmington farmers market. How do you or do you not view that business? Do you view it any differently because it's our own Wilmington residency offering?
Yeah, we're definitely interested in having local Wilmington vendors.
Okay.
But it's definitely if they fit within the parameters of
Sure.
what a farmer's market is.
Okay. Perfect. Thank you.
What are the parameters exactly for your vendors?
Well, we really, what the main thing we want to do is bring fresh produce from the area,
Sure.
and a variety of it. I think last year in the end, we had 4 farmers, and 2 of them had pretty similar kind of, I wouldn't say standard. I think they had a pretty good variety of produce, but we also had a farm that specialized in unusual herbs and greens, stuff like that. And then we had another farmer that grew a lot of heirloom tomatoes and other sort of unusual vegetables. So I think variety is what we're looking for with the farmers, with the produce. That's definitely the main focus. And then beyond that, we're looking for stuff that's high quality, handmade, and just sort of typical of New England, I guess, that fits with Wilmington.
Was there some kind of a 40-mile radius or something?
We had originally started, we hoped to go for a 40-mile radius. I don't think we were too much beyond that. We had, one farmer was from Sunderland. I can't remember exactly where they all were from. Farmer Dave was from Dracut. Gowette Farm was from Andover, North Andover. And Hilltop came from Westport, Massachusetts. So they were probably the farthest, Westport and Sunderland. So we hope to go for a 40-mile radius. As a first-year farmers market, we didn't have people who were willing to take a chance on us, so we widened our radius.
And as far as the other vendors go, is there some kind of guidelines if they're not a farm or a meat producer or anything like that? Some of the other ones we noticed, and I don't want to say I got complaints, but the only comments that I heard, other than
Yeah.
everything was wonderful, was it was
We did
almost-
have in our market rules that anybody sort of on the craft or food vendor had to be juried to get in. We were supposed to be provided with samples. And I think we were so anxious to fill the spaces that people came in that we wouldn't necessarily give another chance to. And also in some cases, they were people from Wilmington, so we also felt like they're from Wilmington, so we at least wanted to give them a chance. But we've amended our bylaws to say that vendors cannot be resellers. That was something that a lot of us felt was definitely a negative thing last season, is that there were people selling, beads that clearly were not handmade. They were, probably bought wholesale from China somewhere. So that was definitely a disappointment for us.
Okay.
And so we've amended our bylaws to say you have to submit, that already existed. You have to submit samples, any crafts will be juried to get in. And actually what we'd like to focus on more is, if we have artisans, we'd like them to maybe demonstrate their art. If we have a goldsmith, have them working on site, or if we have a potter, if they could possibly be making pottery while they're there, or doing some kind of demonstration. So you can actually see that these are the things that they produce.
Okay. Mr. Shampoo, would you have any?
Briefly. Ms. Burnham, thank you very much. I have continued to be impressed with yours and the entire Farmers Market organization level of detail, the organization, the content of the information that we, as the Board of Selectmen, are receiving from you. So I feel very well informed, and I appreciate that very much. So kudos to you on that. I'm certainly in favor of the season extension into September, because I too, like many of the residents, felt like we missed out on an opportunity for some of the harvest vegetables. I'm inclined to support the earlier opening of 10 o'clock, as long as, I don't know, maybe we can put a contingency or something upon the acceptance of those hours by the faith organizations in that area. I know that St. Thomas Parish has a 9 o'clock mass, which empties out, and there's traffic occurring away from St. Thomas at around 10, around the same time you'd be sort of setting up and stuff. So, if there's reason for concern, then we want to maybe be flexible there. I don't know what the service hours for the Methodist Congregational
10
or
o'clock.
Abundant Life. Okay, so you know better. Yeah, I mean, if there's no
In the summer,
concern,
yeah.
if there's no concern among the clergy or among those that are, involved in those respective faith organizations, then I don't personally have a concern either. I just want to be respectful to those organizations as well. So I'm inclined to accept it contingent upon those organizations' acceptance.
I should say also, we said 10 to 1 because we're looking for a 3-hour block. If you feel it's better for us to go 10:30 to 1:30 or 11 to 2, that's also fine with us. We just know that 2 o'clock on, and chances are if we go 11 to 2, I imagine 1:30 on, it's, that last half hour is going to be kind of a slow time no matter when we stop. But if you feel it's better to go 10:30 to 1:30, that's also fine with us. Or
Two questions and follow up to that. If the market starts at 10 a.m., what time, just as a matter of practicality, what time do the vendors
Half an
arrive
hour.
to show up?
half an hour before.
It's at 9:30.
Yeah.
And then breakdown takes a half hour?
Half an hour. They're supposed to be gone within half an hour.
Okay, and then to Mr. Shampoo's point, when do you feel as though you need a some definitive action on the hours?
Well, the sooner the better, because we're getting a lot of requests right now. People saying, we're setting up our market seasons, and we need to know if we can make your market, and if we can't, then we need to find another market to go to for that.
And I guess just from a practical standpoint, I'm wondering, I mean, we grant requests with conditions all the time, but I'm just wondering, in this case, it may not be a simple yes or no from the various faith-based organizations and churches you talked about. I mean, in other words, that a church might come to us and say, well, we have no objection to it if it started at, 10:30.
Yeah.
Or another one might say, well, we have no objection to it if there's not more than 100 cars. I mean, so it's kind of hard to create a contingency that's not a black and white determination by a town official. So, or either a black and white determination by somebody else or a judgment call by a town official, I guess is my point. So if we're looking to get that input, then I would suggest we need to do it a different way.
I guess from my feeling, and maybe you've done this homework, I know you've just given us 10 o'clock is the Methodist services, I believe. We know 9 o'clock is St. Thomas services. I don't know about the Congregational or Abundant Life, what their time services are, but I don't know, I'm just thinking out loud here. Perhaps, you just mentioned 10:30.
Right.
That seems like it might accommodate allowing everyone to get into the Methodist church and in sort of situated, and allow all the folks from St. Thomas to already have been vacated. So that seems like it accommodates both of those two churches. The other two, I don't know, but 10:30 seems like it's rising to the point of maybe making more sense than 10 in my mind. So do you know about the other two churches
I
at all?
don't, actually. I do know that we did have people getting out of church services and coming over as we were setting up, saying, that whatever church it was, they got out at 12. And they would come over to the market and see us setting up and say, oh, well, we're not going to wait around for half an hour. So we're hoping to capture those people. So there must be somebody who starts at 11, I guess.
I think the Baptist church might start at 11.
Maybe, yeah.
Maybe there's, you can't please all the people all the time. I don't know, 10:30, but then we just, if we were to come to a conclusion and vote on it, obviously I think we'd want to reach out as a board to the leaders of these parishes and let them know that we're going to have a change that may or may not affect their parishioners, and so that they can inform their parishioners as well. I don't know, maybe I'm making a bigger project out of this.
Are
I'm
there any
not
other
intentionally.
conflicts with sports or anything?
Not on Sunday, although it may be that the Papuana will have an opportunity to utilize the new field at some point. That's something that would have to be arranged. As you know, the difficulty is because we won't have a parking lot at the high school.
Right.
So that would create the most difficulty. I think I would just caution the board that you may want to certainly consider the churches, but I'm not sure we should necessarily establish a precedent that asks the churches if they are, if they're
Okay,
for or against it. I think that's something that we may not want to do. The concern that I would have would be relative to traffic, and I think the condition could be that if it turns out that there is a traffic issue, that we would have to ask the farmers market to address the traffic issue, and that may be to hire somebody in the police department to address the traffic issue at a certain time. I'm thinking that probably we could handle that, but that would be the only point I would make. Obviously, I did bring the matters to the department heads, and from the department head's point of view, none of them objected to the change from their perspective, specifically, Shelley Newhouse at the Board of Health, Dawn Onset at the DPW. And it's difficult, I think, for the Chief Pagonis to, make a real specific judgment call, because it's hard to tell what's going to happen. But he believes that he could handle the situation.
Okay.
I was just going to say, of all the points that have been made, two things, just to follow up with something the manager mentioned with respect to Papuana and the use of that new field. I believe that it's the town's expectation that field is going to increase the availability of play on a number of different levels, and I do not believe that voting for this is going to prevent that. We may have to work around some dates or whatnot, but I think that's important. And certainly, Mike, if I'm missing the boat on that, speak up, because I
No, I think you're-
don't think it's going to
I
prevent
think you're
that.
right.
I think it's
I
worth saying.
think that we can work that out. It might be
Different
different
dates,
dates.
different, right, okay. And so based on that, and some of the comments that Mr. Shampoo was making, why don't we try and stagger the start time on this at 10:30? If 3 hours makes sense, let's go 10:30 to 1:30. It seems to me if there is a 10 o'clock and 11 o'clock service, the vendors showing up isn't going to create the traffic issue. It's the influx
Right,
of
they
people
have
at
one
the
area
start
that they
time. So,
park in.
so let's go with that. I know we've been mindful of the churches, and as I say, going forward, this is something that we'll have to continue to adjust if it doesn't work out for a season or there's some friction there. So I'm comfortable with the points that have been made here that we could go 10:30 to 1:30 without a big problem.
Okay. Any questions or comments from the audience? I see different people out there.
I
Yeah.
do, if I could just take a minute. So my name is Lisa Johnson, and I spent the first year, I ran the initiative of fundraising for the farmers market. And at that time, it was just a concept. So I grabbed a partner, and we went off and we developed the fundraising program and raised thousands of dollars to help start up the farmers market. On top of that, I volunteered by running activities each week at the farmers market and bringing WOW and other members there to shake hands and meet the public. At that time, we did not have a family bakery, but today where I stand is we do have a family bakery. We are Wilmington residents. We started a residential bakery called Wowo's Goodies, and I'm here to ask Dana to consider Wowo's Goodies as a full-time, each week vendor to the farmers market. And that's all I asked for the amount of time we put into this.
I can't answer myself. I have to bring it to my board, Lisa, you know. But we'll, once, as we've told you, once we understand what our dates are and what our times are, then we'll be getting in touch with all our vendors.
Okay.
And we'll let
So
you know.
to this point, at this point in time, what we've been told is you're accepting back the two vendors, which we appreciate
That's
that, as full-time and will be considered part-time. However, we do have some differentiating product. We'd like for you to consider the gluten-free, the whoopie
Of
pies.
course.
None of the other vendors have those, as well as being local residents. So we'd like to be considered.
Absolutely.
So we appreciate you taking that back.
Very good. Any other comments from the audience? No? Did you have something else down there?
Judy,
Nope, not me.
I guess we could entertain a motion if everybody sounds like everybody's on board with some staggered hours and.
I want to back up a little bit. Are the dates of the June 17th through September 30th, are those okay with everyone also? Just want to double check.
I don't have a problem, like I said earlier, is the manager's here more frequent than we are. And if he sees there's a problem, I think he would address it.
Yeah, there's nothing that I'm aware of that is scheduled right now. However, the selectmen have always granted permission to certain events, such as the Justin O'Neill Race Walk, which has been held both in September and in May. Last year it was in May. I think they're determining whether or not they want to do that again. So I presume the selectmen want to keep that commitment. So that could be the only problem that I see right now in terms of a displacement of a standing activity. So I would suggest that if you're interested in going through these dates, that you consider approving them with the at least with the tacit understanding that if there is another group that has already traditionally used the common, that we either try to work that out somehow, or the farmers market be willing to give up that particular date.
Right, which we are. I mean, we understand that the 4th of July week, there'll be no market. So, yeah, we would certainly accommodate something like that.
Yeah, I guess if nothing else, we can be confident that come this time next year, if this applicant is unreasonable, we're going to remember that come next year's meeting.
One other thing, graduation is the week,
It's
Graduation,
it's early,
I think
the
it's
first weekend in June.
3rd? June
June
3rd.
3rd.
first weekend.
Yes. And I believe the setup for the 4th of July activities would not interfere with either with the 24th or with the 8th, but it would obviously with the 1st.
Right.
And just one more thing, just to pick up on what Selectperson O'Connell said is, if there's any Wilmington residents that do have something, to offer in here, I really hope that they be considered because it's here in the town. That reflects on
Yeah,
my
absolutely.
support right here too, so I want that to be highly considered. Thank you.
Okay, so we want to put all that in the form of a motion?
I move that we grant the request for the farmer's market to be held on Sundays from June 17 to September 30, exclusive of July 1st from the hours of 10:30 to 1:30, 10:30 a.m. to 1:30 p.m. All is under the conditions outlined by the manager.
Second?
Okay, we have a motion made, second, all in favor? It's unanimous.
Thanks very much.
Okay, good luck.
Thank you.
Good luck with everything.
Okay, our next appointment is our discussion relative to the board's intention to lay out the ways described in the proposed warrant article regarding Fiorenza Drive, Jake's Lane, Marion Street, 2 portions, and My Way Circle.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, as you know, this is a process that we go through each year around this time if there are any street acceptance requests. And in this case, we do, and you have a correspondence, a memorandum from the engineering director, Mr. Pronsky, along with street acceptance plans. Specifically, we're talking about Jake's Lane, which is also known as the 155 Lake Street subdivision, Fiorenza Drive, and My Way Circle, which are the Andover Heights 1 and 2 subdivisions, and 2 portions of Marion Street extension. The engineering division reviewed these subdivisions to confirm the present status. The subdivisions have been inspected by DPW during construction, and as of this date, the subdivisions have been completed to the satisfaction of the engineering division. Mylar as-built and street acceptance plans for Marion Street extensions, Jake's Lane, Fiorenza Drive, and My Way Circle have been delivered to the engineering division, and as I indicated, we have the attached plans. And then the memorandum goes on to discuss each of the areas. Jake's Lane, as I indicated, is in the 155 Lake Street subdivision and was approved by both the Board of Appeals and Planning Board in September of 2007 and 2008, respectively. And again, meets all of the conditions. Fiorenza Drive and My Way Circle are within the Andover Heights subdivisions, which were approved by the Planning Board under subdivision control back in 1992 and 1994, respectively. You know that the streets are off of Andover Street, and My Way Circle is off of Fiorenza Drive. All of the subdivision easements have been conveyed to the town. And the stormwater runoff is discharged to 2 detention ponds, so all of those drainage issues have been taken care of. Marion Street Extension was developed in 2 small portions. The large portion is from house number 99 to house number 110, and the smaller portion from house number 110 to house number 114. Again, all the runoff issues and drainage issues have been taken care of, as well as easements have been conveyed to the town. So the engineering director is recommending that the selectmen proceed with the acceptance of Jake's Lane, Fiorenza Drive, My Way Circle, and the Marion Street extensions as public ways at the next annual town meeting. And I would request that if the board is so inclined, that they vote to continue the process, and that process would continue at the next meeting with a public hearing at the Board of Selectmen's meeting on March the 12th.
Questions, comments, or a motion?
I'd make a motion to, as described by the town manager, to accept the streets as he indicated.
Motion made.
Second?
All in favor? It's unanimous. Unanimous. One abstention. It wasn't unanimous. Okay. Thank you. And our next discussions, a preliminary discussion of the annual town meeting for non-petition warrant articles.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, you have before you a copy of the draft portion of the warrant that has to do with the non-petitioned articles, those articles that are brought forward by town government. At the last meeting, we noted what the petitioned articles were, and we typically try to bring these to the Board of Selectmen's attention in sufficient time in the event that the board wishes to either add or delete from any of these warrant articles. As you know, in this case, it is up to the board for each of these articles as to whether to go forward. So I will just try to read through these and explain where we are at this point. The first article of a town meeting is always the election article, and so that election will be held on Saturday, the 28th of April, with the polls going from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m., and at that time, voters will be asked to vote for one selectman for a term of 3 years, 2 members of the school committee for terms of 3 years, a moderator for the term of 3 years, a member of the Housing Authority and a member of the Redevelopment Authority, each for a term of 5 years, and a member of the Regional Vocational Technical School Committee for a term of 3 years. From that point, we go to the town meeting as we know it on May 5th, 2012 at the high school gymnasium. The meeting to begin at 10:30 a.m. once a quorum is present. Article 2 would be to hear committee reports. There are no reports of committees that are coming back from any previous town meeting. Article 3 is to authorize the town to pay any unpaid bills of previous years, and as we know, there are no issues there in terms of any unpaid bills from previous years. And again, these are all standard articles until we get to Article 6. Article 4 would authorize the treasurer-collector to enter into agreements with one or more banks doing business in the Commonwealth that would permit the town to maintain funds on deposits with these institutions who would provide the town with banking services. And Article 5 is the appropriation article for the expenses pertinent to town government, in this case fiscal year 2013, and that is what we have been reviewing, as the board is well aware, over the last month with the Finance Committee. There are still 2 additional Finance Committee review sessions that will be held this week, Tuesday and Thursday, to conclude the initial review of all of the town and school budgets. Article 6 begins the town's efforts to purchase capital equipment, and in this case we will be asking to purchase 4 replacement police cruisers for the police department, and as you know from the budget presentation, the anticipated cost for the police cruisers would be $144,000. We'll be asking to purchase a 1,250 gallon per minute pumper for the fire department. We anticipate that the cost would be approximately $630,000, of which a little over $59,000 would come from capital project closeouts that are available to the town. And then we would be asking to purchase 2 pieces of equipment for the Department of Public Works, both to be assigned to the Highway Division. One would be a replacement vacuum street sweeper, which we estimate to cost approximately $230,000, and the other one would be a replacement backhoe loader that we estimate to cost $128,000. So unless there are questions, I'll just keep going. And again, this is material that you've certainly already heard.
Just point of information, Mr. Carr.
Yes,
You
sir.
say one replacement vacuum street sweeper. What happens when we replace? What happens to the old? Do they go to like an auction, or are they?
If it's, yeah, we'll have a surplus auction if it's good enough, or we may use parts. The other one is a mechanical sweeper that we're using now that's fairly new, so there'll be a mechanical and a vacuum street sweeper. The street sweeper that's being replaced, I think it goes back to 1998 or so. My guess is it's probably not worth a whole lot, but we do put all of that out for auction.
Similar on the police cruisers, we'll repurpose those that are workable and usable
Yeah,
for other.
The police cruisers are recycled, as you're saying. The cruisers the frontline cruisers, which are used 24/7 and get the heaviest use, obviously, would then be replaced and go back into the police fleet. And in turn, if we're replacing any of those vehicles, they may go out and finally recycle into other departments, where at the very end of the life, you'll see coming up at the surplus auction this year, probably a few sedans that are, maybe in the 15 to 20-year-old category that will go for auction, and any of the money that comes in from that, in accordance with our bylaws, would go to the Capital Stabilization Fund.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Article 7 will ask the town to raise and appropriate approximately $68,400 to purchase new digital portable and mobile radios to upgrade the police communication system. We've been going through this process for a time now, and this will pretty much complete that communication system upgrade. We're looking to purchase 20 of the digital portable radios and 12 of the mobile radios. Article 8 is, again, an article that speaks to our roof repair program. In this case, we have 3 roofs that we're looking at this year. We did 4 roof projects last year. We'll be asking to appropriate money to replace approximately 9,700 square feet of roof area at the West Intermediate School. The roof area to be replaced is in the music area and the kitchen and the foyer, and I just want to make sure I give you the right dollar amount for that. It's $245,000. We're looking to replace over 15,000, about 15,300 square feet of roof area at the Wildwood School for approximately $300,000, and that's in the kitchen, and over the kitchen, the hallway, the foyer, and that entire east wing of the school. And then we're looking to appropriate $90,000 to replace 8,800 square feet of roof area at the Wilmington Memorial Library, and it's our intention to take those funds from the capital stabilization account. Article number 9 is a similar article to the program that we did at the Shawshene School when we replaced all the windows and the exterior doors, and I think we got some pretty good reaction to that. We also were able to leverage our funding through the MSBA, as you recall, after the town had initially appropriated through borrowing for that school project. We were able to get into the green repair program and help fund that program. We were looking to do the same thing again this year, and the Board of Selectmen recalls that back in January you signed a statement of interest to the MSBA for this particular project. In this case, it would be to appropriate approximately $800,000, of which about half, if we are approved, would be funded again through the MSBA. Rather than their green repair program, it's now called an accelerated repair program, but it's just the same kind of program, just a different title. And again, it would allow us to do what we did at the Shawshene School at the North Intermediate School by replacing the single pane windows with energy efficient units as well as the exterior doors.
And I'm sorry, it's contingent upon acceptance by MSBA of that project? Is
Yes, yes. I mean, the town could, if we learn by the time we get to the town meeting that there's not funding available to us, then the town could make a decision to to try to increase its funding. But at this point, the budget is only calling for $400,000, with the balance coming from the MSBA.
We will know by town meeting whether,
I can't guarantee that, Mike. We're certainly hoping
Yeah.
that we would know, but we're essentially at the mercy of the MSBA, and when they meet, we've provided them with all of the information that they need to make a decision, and so now we're just sort of in a waiting game. But we will we'll stay on them to try to see what their schedule is.
thank you.
Just quick question, if I may. Would you use the same vendor that did the Shawshene project?
It
per
would,
se,
it would
or
have to
how-
go out, it would have to go out to bid. It would be a competitive bid. We would have to hire a project manager in keeping with the requirements to use MSBA funds. And the project manager would go out and get a designer, and then the designer would assist the town in procuring a contractor. But that would all be through a competitive bid process.
I figured as such, do you think that we would be streamlining our look and feel of our buildings in terms of, would it have a similar color pattern to what's been designed, or does it depend on the environment of where the building's located?
Typically, we try to match it up with the environment. There's been no determination on any of that
Okay.
yet, but that would be done in conjunction with the school superintendent and the principal and the superintendent of public buildings, and those of us that will be, working on
Overseeing
that
that.
project.
Okay, to
I'd also want to point out that, because you have to go through a rather elongated process with the MSBA, it's not likely that a project like this would happen until probably the summer of 2013. And that's also, the difficulty in doing school projects is that you have a limited window. You don't want to necessarily do a major project like this when the schools are in session. And so in order to go through the full MSBA process and go through a design and a procurement process, that could begin to happen right after an appropriation at town meeting, and assuming MSBA approval. But then it would take some time after that before you could actually get into construction. The other point I would make is they have to manufacture all these windows, and we were actually first in line the last time. There are some schools that are having window replacement projects as we speak, and that becomes very difficult because they have to work around the students, and that's something we try to avoid. So I would expect that if this goes forward, it would happen in the summer of 2013. The town is asking to appropriate $78,000 to repaint the interior of the Shawshene Elementary School. This is something we had started several years back, where we tried to do some interior painting. Again, that also becomes difficult because we have a limited time in which we can do that kind of painting because of the schools, so we try to work around that. This is a project that we hope to be able to get done over the summer, and I think doing the Shawshene School makes a lot of sense, particularly where we did the windows there. It'll dress up the interior now, and that's something that we're hoping to be able to get funding for. The town is asking to raise and appropriate $42,000 to replace the 8 existing garage doors at the Department of Public Works. Article 12 would continue our miscellaneous facilities funding program. It's an account that we're able to use if we're short money on any of these projects, or if we have the ability to leverage funds against other grants that might become available, particularly energy efficient related grants. So this would allow us to undertake just various improvements and repairs to municipal and school facilities, and we would be able to address any emergency issues, any failures in mechanical systems, or any code compliance issues that come up, and also particularly to undertake energy efficiencies. That would be $125,000. We are asking to appropriate $90,000 to be used at the middle school for the installation of a wireless network. That's something that we think is very important in terms of continuing the technology improvements in the schools. And this is one of the priorities of the superintendent, and that article is Article 13 that seeks to appropriate those dollars. Article 14 is the transfer article that we have in the budget each year. You know, when you're appropriating $80 million, you can't always be exact as to how much in the end it's going to cost for heating fuel, or for gasoline, or for overtime and an account or another, or insurance, or any one of those items, snow and ice. And so we look at this time of year at the various budget line items and transfer, plug holes if we have monies available in one account, but we're over in another account. For example, it's going to snow this week, but, or at least they tell us it's going to snow this week. But we do have a fairly healthy surplus right now in the snow and ice account. Typically, last year, when there were more than 100 inches of snow, we did not have a surplus. We had a deficit, and we had to take money from other accounts to plug that hole. This year, right now, we budgeted $547,000 or so for snow removal this year, and we've expended a little over $200,000. Most of that was in the sand and salt supplies that we beef up, that we anticipate using and we buy early on. Obviously, what we don't use this year, we're able to keep for next year, and that prevents us from having to expend more funds. But if we only have a couple of storms, you know, over this season, we're going to have some money left over, and that'll be an example of a source of funds where we can plug a deficit. An example of where there might be a deficit is in items like fuel, heating fuel, or gasoline. The same way that families are paying more to heat their, you know, their property, we pay more. Although we did lock in at $2.99 this year, and you know, we can all wish that we were paying only $2.99 when we locked in. It was, man, it was $2.22 that we locked in a year ago. So that's how these things shift. We've happened to make the right decision in both the last couple of years, but it doesn't always work out that way. Gasoline is a little bit different, and you've seen those rising prices, and we aren't able to lock in there. That the industry doesn't work that way for gasoline. So that's an example of an area where we might have to plug some holes. Article 15 is a standard article that we've been using here now since about 1996, when we established the Senior Citizen Tax Work-Off Program. We'll ask to appropriate $15,360 so that we can continue this program. We anticipate that would allow us to utilize the services of approximately 24 seniors that meet the criteria, and they would go into various responsibilities at school and town departments. They would make minimum wage, and the upset amount for each would be $640. It's been a very successful program. As you know, the schools have used it to take advantage of seniors in the classroom to assist as aides or office workers. We've certainly used it here. We've used it in public works with hydrant painters and other things that we would not normally get to, and it gives a little bit of a relief to the senior citizens that are taking advantage of that program. Article 16, also an article that we have every year. In this case, we'd ask to appropriate $6,000 for the town's observance of both the Memorial Day and Veterans Day celebrations. Article 17 would be to request $750 for the purpose of renewing the lease of the Veterans of Foreign Wars clubhouse. At one time, the town was spending $2,250 here when we had 3 active veterans organizations. There is only one at this point, and that's what we would appropriate. Article 18, a standard article that would authorize or reauthorize, as the case may be, revolving accounts that the town is involved in under Chapter 44, Section 53E and a half. And again, the reauthorization would be for the septic system loan program that we've had many, many years here, working with Title V issues, and also for the compost bin program. This year, we'll be asking for a new revolving account to assist us in the provision of ambulance services. So you'll see in the budget document that we're increasing our ability to accrue revenue in this direction, and this is something that the town accountant is recommending. Article 19 is to accept as public ways those streets that we already discussed. Fiorenza Drive, My Way Circle, Jake's Lane, and the both portions of Marion Street. Article 20 is something that is being recommended by town council in consultation with myself and the police chief, and it has to do with the curfew bylaw. It is a simple addition to the curfew bylaw that was passed last year, and it has to do with enforcement and penalties, and it's really an alternative to criminal prosecution. We never wanted to do that. We never wanted to go in that end here. But you will recall that the Attorney General's office had some issues, and so the council has recommended that we put in a very simple amendment that establishes as an alternative to criminal prosecution under the applicable provisions of the general laws, that through its police department, the department may elect to use non-criminal disposition procedures with regard to curfew violators, and we would establish penalties for violation of the first offense, $100, and any offense thereafter, $150. Article 21 would be to see if the town would vote to accept as a gift a parcel of land that's on the Andover Heights definitive subdivision plan at Fiorenza Drive, about 44,000 square feet of land. And this is to assist the town in the drainage issues that have happened there, assist in terms of dealing with it. This particular lot contains a redesigned drainage structure for the entire subdivision. It could have been given to the Conservation Commission and not even gone through this process, but it was the Department of Public Works recommendation, along with the Engineering Division and the concurrence of the Planning Department, that the land be given to the town, rather specifically to the Conservation Commission, so that there would not be any difficulties in terms of maintenance and any enlargement that might have to be done to the structure that would facilitate the ability to provide appropriate drainage for that subdivision. And that's really the only reason why we're going in that direction. Article 22 is what the board has been working on now, and that is the acquisition of the Yenthouse Farm, the 9 Cross Street property. That's 20.3 acres of land located at 9 Cross Street. You know that we have a contingent purchase and sale with Century Bank for $1,182,500. The funds would not come from fiscal year 2013 budget, but instead would be from free cash that's available right now. There would be no borrowing, and there would be no impact on the taxpayer. So this is something that the board was very much involved with in terms of the negotiations, and this article would help bring us to fruition. Obviously the purpose would be for open space and particularly for recreation and for the provision of fields and recreation opportunities for Wilmington residents.
To that point, may I ask you, Mr. Carra, how does, or what is the mechanism for purposing, assuming this article passes, and I hope it does, and we can add to the land stock that the town owns, which I think is a boon for us all. when would discussions and when would, or how, what would the mechanism be for deciding on and putting together a purpose for that space? Is that another town meeting in the subsequent years?
No, a specific purpose could be done, I think, by the Board of Selectmen, but an appropriation would have to be done by the town meeting. The article itself calls for it to be open space, recreation, and general municipal purposes. The last phrase is just kind of a catch-all, but the fact that we put in open space and recreation is what it would be.
So that's what
would be used
the
for.
residents are voting on.
Right.
So, but if we are in the future going to appropriate funds to rebuild or do something with that land, fields or anything else, we'd go to town meeting for that appropriation.
Yes, I mean, it would be my expectation that the development of the property would emanate first from some committee that would probably be established in conjunction with the Board of Selectmen, that we would do some due diligence first by staff, the engineer, conservation folks, and others, and then we would meet with whatever committee or whatever group that the board wishes to establish. We would try to identify grant opportunities, fundraising opportunities, and then once we know what the plan is, once we know that we can fit, a soccer field and a baseball field and tennis courts or whatever, a bocce court, whatever the town is looking to do there with appropriate parking. Once that's established, we can then set a budget for that and then go forward. But a future town meeting would have to appropriate funds for the development of the property, and it's impossible to determine what that's going to be until we know how it's going to be developed.
So, to you folks, my colleagues, I guess that's something, if this gets voted in the affirmative at town meeting, we want to establish a plan for assigning a committee and hiring contractors or doing whatever over the course of the summer. I mean, I feel like striking while the iron is hot. I don't want to let the land sit there with foundations built on it. So I just kind of lobbed that out there. I'm not looking for a vote or necessarily discussion, but my intent, my desire would be to act quickly upon the town's voting in favor of this article at the town meeting.
And the final article of the petitioned articles, and I say final only in terms of draft, is something that I'm suggesting the board consider again, and if you would prefer not to, that's certainly the board's prerogative. And that has to do with the Wilmington Redevelopment Authority. As you know, we had discussion about the status of the Redevelopment Authority. The last time we did this was in July of 2008. Over 3.5 years ago, when we met with some of the remaining members of the Redevelopment Authority. At the time, there were just 3 members of the 5-member committee, and we talked to them about the fact that their work had been completed and there really was no additional work that had to be done, and no substantial or significant amounts of money to do anything. There's about $7,000 available now. They've completed all of their assignments. There's been little or no interest in the Redevelopment Authority, as the board knows, in terms of people running for office. Right now, there are 2 people on the Redevelopment Authority, so you don't even have a quorum as necessary. The state has a member who they've never appointed, or they haven't appointed a member in many, many years. The former chairman, Mr. Gilbert, is now, as you know, deceased. And so there's a member that was elected last year, and another member who is currently experiencing some illness. So we're down to 2 folks. The specifics of the law call for a certain way in which you can dissolve the organization. And it's whenever the municipal officers of a city or the voters at a special town meeting determine that there is a need for a redevelopment authority, they establish that authority. When the redevelopment authority determines that there is no further need for its existence, and that's what we asked the redevelopment authority at the last meeting, and they decided that they wanted to wait and not dissolve at that time. The selectmen agreed. But when they do determine that there's no additional need for their existence and that all outstanding obligations have been satisfied, and I can tell you that they have. There was one bill that they had to pay to an engineering firm that they had an obligation on several years ago, and they made that payment, so everything has been satisfied. The redevelopment authority may, by a majority vote of the 5 members, submit the question of its dissolution to voters at an annual town meeting, and then the town can act upon that. In talking with town council, we don't have 5 members, so we can't really do that. I suppose the board could attempt to fill the vacancies with folks who would then move to dissolve. And so I suggested to town council that if the selectmen were so inclined, would you consider drafting special legislation for the town to go in that direction? And so town council has done that with the understanding that the selectmen may not want to go through that process. But we right now have a redevelopment authority in name only, not in actual substance, and there's approximately $7,000 in a bank account that I suspect earns about 30 cents every month. And it would be my recommendation that the board consider this this action to petition the general court to seek enactment of special legislation, notwithstanding to the general laws, that the town redevelopment authority be dissolved and that any funds revert to the general fund of the town. I was trying to look for a way in which we could move on. People don't run for the office, and it's to me it makes little sense to go forward. Frankly, if the board doesn't want to do that, it's probably no harm, no foul. Nothing happens. The money sits there, and nobody meets.
And they've completed all their tasks, as you had mentioned, correct? There's no outstanding business that they've had to do for years, right?
Right. They developed the property, the Jewel Drive property, 30 years ago. They were involved with some of the Route 38 construction, only because they had money and they provided it to the town to help that 38 construction, which was done in the 90s. There's been no activity. Some of you will remember Mike Matt, who was the executive director years ago, hasn't been a part of the operation, I want to say 12, 13 years. So that's where we are.
38 project, then Jewel Drive, they had to clean up an easement or something. That's about all the.
What was their mission? What was their mission statement, or whatever? And what were they charged with? What would they put in place to do?
When it was established,
Yeah.
well, I was just a lad, and I can tell you that it was in terms of a urban renewal project, really, as the way they looked at it, and they were assembling land that might have been available, anything that would have been in the substandard or kind of land, for the purpose of putting that land together and then going out and offering the land's availability to developers who would agree to develop that property. It was first broached by the town back in 1956 based upon my research, where they determined that there was a need for a redevelopment authority, and specifically for the purpose of engaging in land assembly and redevelopment projects. They felt it was in the public interest that they organize such an authority. Despite doing that in 1956, it didn't really happen until 1966, and that's when they identified land off of Eames Street, which we now know as that Jewel Drive area. And they established a committee, and that committee helped through urban renewal programs, I suspect, of the federal government, the state government, to develop the property. They raised initially $2,000 for that effort. Most of the work was done in the 1970s, Jewel Drive.
It strikes me as a concept whose day has, or they had its day and it's gone. Our population or the makeup of our community today being so different as it was in the 50s, 60s, and even in the 70s, I can't envision what practical application there would be for a redevelopment authority in the context of our current sort of makeup of our town. So I'm inclined to accept the article as written, and I'm trying to waffling back and forth as to whether or not it makes sense to try to, repopulate the authority. Is there merit to the idea? What's the I'm not sure I could make a good argument. So I accept what you've said.
If I may add, go ahead, I'm sorry.
Okay, go ahead.
Is there any futuristic business that would be problematic as a result of not having this authority in place? Is there anything business-wise that we would do differently with the group not being assembled? That you can think of?
I can't think of anything.
I just had to agree with the manager. That committee's been in limbo for about 15 years, and it's like anything else at a local, state, and federal level. Committees do get dissolved, and I do agree that it's probably in the best interest of the town to go forward and to dissolve the committee. 'Cause there's nothing pressing.
I don't think so. I mean, we can, if the board is so inclined to leave it on the warrant, and as we due diligence on this, if we get to a point where at May 5th at the town meeting, we think it makes no sense, we could always withdraw the article. And I'll explore it further with Attorney Foskett, particularly with regard to the question you just asked, Judy. I can't think of anything, but maybe he can raise some points for us to think about.
Yes, there's no action for us to take on that tonight, other than just knowledge and discussion.
Yes.
Okay.
The action would be at the next meeting, however, for the board to approve the warrant.
Thank you.
That concludes the petitioned articles that are before the board, Mr. Chairman, if you have any questions or members of the board.
There was a hand raised in the audience.
So somebody,
If you didn't see the question, I actually had a question related to the redevelopment authority. I don't know if someone did ask it, if there was any federal money that might be available for an organization like that which we could pursue. I also had a question, and I asked it in ignorance. I seem to recall that part of southern Wilmington was designated as a brownfields redevelopment area. That may or may not be true. Maybe the town manager would know. And if that is true, could the redevelopment authority, if it was reconstituted, look into trying to get some federal money and programs to redevelop those areas? And I ask that in ignorance. I don't know if there actually is an area in southern Wilmington that was designated as a brownfield area. I thought that there was, but I may be incorrect in that.
I'm not aware of it having been designated a brownfield area. One thing I would say, though, that there are other programs in place where I'm not sure you would need a redevelopment authority. For example, the program that we're looking at with analog, the tax financing programs and those kinds of issues that are probably better handled at this point by the professional staff. Mr. Moynihan gets involved with it, Mrs. Hamilton, those folks. We certainly, can look at whether there are any federal grant operations, but opportunities. But I don't believe that there's any designation of a brownfield.
Bring that up again in ignorance. I don't know,
Yeah.
but I do seem to recall, in my mind's eye, I thought I heard some comment about a designation of some brownfields. Maybe it was in Woburn that was adjacent to North Wilmington. I don't know. I'd have to look into that. So I asked that question in ignorance as well. Thank you.
Well, there's probably a reason why the authority was established in the first place. I know
any
that
other
it's used
questions
in other places
from the
for
board?
Purposes
Before we
for the
go to,
authority. Mr.
communications.
Semaglia. Same subject, you know what I mean? that.
Any-
well, I would like to see the
it's
board
not public
actually
comments yet,
consider
no.
looking into some,
Mr.
other
McDowell.
reasons for the purpose of the authority. I appreciate this,
Okay, any other
Yeah,
questions
sure.
from the board before we go to communications? No? We're good on that? Okay, thank you. Communications.
The board has a copy of a notification that went to our town clerk from Kelly Gunnigan, the Assistant Attorney General, working with the Attorney General, Martha Coakley, that approved the amendments to the town bylaws adopted under Article 4 of the warrant for the special town meeting that was convened on December 10th. You will recall that was a bylaw that allowed us to lien for certain tree removal costs. So they approved the bylaw as it was constructed, and that's the notification to the board. You have correspondence from the Massachusetts Municipal Association regarding school transportation costs for homeless students. And essentially what it is State Auditor Suzanne Bump has determined and told the governor and legislative leaders that the adoption of the McKinney-Vento Act, it's a federal act that requires expanded school transportation options for homeless students, was in fact an unfunded state mandate that is subject to the local mandate law, and she has indicated that the state should cover the cost. The superintendent of schools has already been in contact on the town's behalf with our legislators to request that they support funding of these costs. There was a survey done of many communities who decided to participate, and for the town of Wilmington, there would be a savings of about $60,000 if the town did not have to cover these costs. We have preliminary wholesale water and sewer assessments from the MWRA. It shows that in terms of the town's water assessments, it's gone down considerably. The final fiscal year 12 water assessment was $493,000. The fiscal year 13 preliminary water assessment is $296,000. And we anticipate right now a slight increase in sewer. Based upon these numbers, we do not anticipate, or we can say categorically, that there will be no increase in the town's water rate again this year. And the town accountant is right now working with the water and sewer superintendent to see whether or not there would be any slight increase in sewer based upon the assessment. These are not final numbers. The numbers continue to go up and down in terms of sewer. Actually, the last time we received numbers on sewer, it went down from this year. This time it's going up slightly. So it's still early in that process, but we don't anticipate any problems. And the good news is on the water, certainly. The board has a letter from Anthony Fields, who's the planning director over in Burlington, and he's also the chairman of the North Suburban Planning Council. And he wrote to the board asking the board to appoint representatives to the North Suburban Planning Council. We have, as many communities have appointed a representative of the town, in this case Carol Hamilton, and as you note in this letter, it indicates that Wilmington's designated representative to the MAPC is Carol Hamilton, and as such she's one of the 3 voting members. Like many communities, however, there's kind of been a fall off in terms of a member of the Board of Selectmen or a city council and a member of a planning board to serve on the committee. The selectmen have always designated Carol as that person. This request is being made by the North Suburban Planning Council to see if a member of the Board of Selectmen would also like to serve, and the board has the authority to make that appointment. The planning board also has the authority to make an appointment as well. So I bring this to the attention of the board. Certainly the town will continue to be represented at any of the MAPC meetings or their subdivision or affiliates through staff. But if the board is so inclined and they want to serve, they can think about it, or you can let me know.
Okay.
We have a request from the town clerk to appoint an additional election worker, and the board is being asked to consider the appointment of Cynthia Walsh, a Wilmington resident, to be added to the list of election workers that were established at the last meeting.
Questions, comments, or a motion?
I'd make a motion to accept the recommendation of the town clerk to appoint Cynthia Walsh to the, as a member of the Board of Registers.
Election.
Election worker,
Election
yep,
Election
second.
Oh, geez, I thought these glasses would help.
Motion made and second. All in favor? It's unanimous.
The board also has a request of Sharon George, town clerk, to appoint a temporary member of the Board of Registrars. With the election on March 6th, the presidential primary, two of the four members of the Board of Registrars, there are three members appointed by the board, plus the town clerk, who serves as town clerk as a member. Two of them will not be in the area. They're in Florida. Good for them. They're retired, and that's a good place to go. But they won't be back here. During the course of an election, if a voter is not on the voter list and still wants to vote, the individual needs to be provided with what is referred to as a provisional ballot. This often comes up when people vote at presidential elections, not necessarily presidential primaries, but it could happen at any time. And it just so happens that if that happens, then you have to have a meeting in which, with the Board of Registrars, where they open and count those ballots and determine whether or not the person really was a registered voter. So if somebody comes and they're not on our list, and we cross-check it with the state and we find that they're not a voter, they can still vote, but their vote is held aside. It's called a provisional ballot. It's rare that that happens, but we want to be ready in the event that it does. And statutorily, the group that has to handle that is the Board of Registrars. In the event that we need to have a temporary appointment, Chapter 51, Section 20 does allow the registrars to notify the board, which they've done, to appoint a temporary member for that one day. And so based on that, I would recommend that the board consider appointing a temporary member, and I would further be so bold as to suggest that you might consider Barbara Buck. She is a former member of the Board of Registrars and is familiar with the process. The current three members have been there for quite some time. As a matter of fact, I think Barbara was the immediate past member who left. We contacted both Barbara and Kay Scanlon. Kay was not available, otherwise she also would have served, and is obviously very qualified. And so I would request that you consider making a temporary appointment of Barbara Buck in the event we need the registrars to act. And they have to, we can't wait for folks to come back, because they have to act by a time certain.
Right.
And that time certain would be March 9th.
Okay. Any questions, comments, or a motion?
I would move to accept the town manager's recommendation and appoint Barbara Buck as a temporary member of the Board of Registrars for March 9th, 2012.
Second?
Motion made and second. All in favor? It's unanimous.
Thank you.
Is there a quorum for that Board of Registers, Mr. Carroll?
3.
The reason for my question is, if by chance one of those three gets sick, wouldn't it be prudent to have a couple alternates?
At this point, we only have this one person. I think if that happened, we'd have to convene a meeting of the board and make another appointment.
So if that happened at election day, there could be a provisional vote, and those don't get counted until you make another appointment that can fill
No,
in?
they get, may I, Mr. Chairman?
Sure.
a person's provisional vote is put into an envelope and set aside in a secure location, and then on March 9th, the Board of Registrars would convene a meeting to open the ballots and make a determination as to what the vote count was. So, if everybody were here, I guess 2 people could get sick also. It's just not something that we deal with.
Presidential election.
Well, it's a presidential primary, and certainly that's why we're making this recommendation to the board, to make sure we have a third person. So I think we'll be okay, and if it turned out that one of those 3 people now could not make the meeting, although my anticipation is that they will be able to, if for some reason one of them couldn't make the meeting, then we would have the authority to convene an emergency meeting of the Board of Selectmen and appoint somebody.
Okay, thank you.
The board's also being asked to consider appointing the retiree member to the Insurance Advisory Committee. As the board knows, the Insurance Advisory Committee is an employee-based committee that the town meets with from time to time. The members of that committee are determined by the member bargaining units themselves, whether they be somebody from the teachers union or the police union, etc. However, the law requires that a representative of the retirees also serve on that committee, and for years and years that person has been Anthony Krasminski. He's no longer able to continue, and so the board is the authority to make that appointment. It's my recommendation that the board consider appointing Robert Palmer as a former employee to serve as the retiree representative of that committee.
Any questions, comments on the motion?
I move to appoint Robert Palmer as the retiree member to the Insurance Advisory Committee.
Second.
Motion made second. All in favor? It's unanimous.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That concludes the regular business before the board.
Thank you. Any public comments? Any public comments? Mr. McDonald, before I call on you this evening, okay? You have done nothing but disrespect this board for the last few months, okay? Yeah, you have, Mr. McDonald, okay?
Give
No,
somebody a letter, and
Mr.
then you
McDonald,
disrespect
Mr.
me.
McDonald.
All right, you need to
You-
respect Mr. Semek.
The name calling that went on last meeting, the disrespect is not gonna happen. If you have something on the public comments, an issue that you would like to bring up, now's the time to do it respectfully.
Thank you, and I would like in return to be treated with respect.
Okay, you're done, Mr. McDonald.
No,
You can't
I'm
stay
not
on
done.
focus. You're finished.
Mr.
Okay.
Shampoo, can you just answer a couple questions? Can you tell us a
Mr.
little bit about
McDonald.
the water tower collapse? Can you tell us if the town owned the water tower, if there's insurance on that?
Yes, it was not a town water tower, but there was initial reports that the town's water tank ruptured. That was not, in fact, the case. It was a private tank, a holding tank, at a private location on 60 Johnston Road. The town does not own that, but obviously we responded. There was police and fire, Public Works, even a town manager that was up there on Friday night, and the work continues to make sure that there's adequate fire protection in that area. It was not a town property.
And, I've been hearing some things that there is a water pressure issue up there.
As I indicated, sure, there is, and that's why it's being dealt with. The water pressure issue is with regard to the businesses and not the homeowners. There's a municipal system that feeds the homeowners, and so we are working with the businesses, with the engineers of the companies that own that property and the adjacent properties to make sure that there's appropriate fire protection there.
And,
Thank you. That was a good question, Mr. McDonald. Thank you very much. Any
I'd
new
like a
business and committee
follow-up
reports?
related to it.
No, you're done,
Hey,
Mr.
how about
McDonald.
treating some people with respect? You want respect? You treat the people that pay your salary with respect. You understand that? You're
Okay.
a town employee, all right? The people of this town pay your salary, all right? My personal
Okay,
opinion is
okay.
you're in conflict of interest.
Okay.
Now-
You're done, Mr. McDonald. You're
Not
finished.
done.
You're not
What I'd
done.
like to
New Business
explain
Committee
is that
reports.
There's
Mr.
elevations
McDonald,
relative to
I'm
water.
gonna ask you one more time politely. You're
I'm gonna tell you
finished.
right now,
You're finished.
You're disrespecting me.
You're finished.
all right?
New business,
When
committee
an elevation of a
reports.
water tank
I'm all set,
is
Mr.
lower
Chairman.
than a bigger tower, Mr. Cowher,
All set.
it can get blown off.
New Business Committee reports?
No.
Down there? Mr. Shampoo?
Embarrassment.
No, I'm good. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
So if another tower
Important
blows
dates,
off,
important dates.
another water tower tips over, it's not a big deal, just
Kevin.
like the fuel tank.
Kevin, chill, guy.
Let
Relax.
me tell you something,
Relax,
Mr.
guy.
McCoy, all right?
Relax.
You got 4 members here, all right? He's not the be-all, end-all. It's like I'm gonna bow down to him because he's God or something? What's the matter with you?
Never asked that, Mr.
Let me tell
McDonald.
you
You're all
something, we
done.
got some
Important
serious
dates.
issues in town with water towers, all right?
Okay, important
This is
dates.
a water tower that was
If you continue
400,000.
on, I'm gonna ask for a recess. I'll entertain a motion for a recess. We'll go out there until he's removed, and we'll come back and finish important dates, if that's what you'd like to do.
I'd be happy to
Or
go
we can go
through
to important dates.
the important dates.
Thank you.
There's a Finance Committee meeting tomorrow evening here at the Town Hall, Room 9, 7 o'clock, February 28th, to review the public safety budgets of the police, central dispatch, animal control, and the fire department. On March 1st, the Finance Committee meets again, that's this Thursday, in Room 9, 7 p.m., to review the Shawshene Technical High School budget, as well as the budgets for the budget for the Wilmington Public Schools. The presidential primary, vote as a reminder that that's March 6th. It's a week from tomorrow, Tuesday, March 6th. Polls open at 7 a.m. and they close at 8 p.m. The Board of Selectmen's next meeting is March 12th, where there will also be, within that meeting, a public hearing relative to the acceptance of streets. And finally, on March 20th, just advance notice that the Finance Committee and Planning Board will hold their joint public hearing relative to the warrant for the annual town meeting at the Town Hall Auditorium at 7 p.m. Petitioners are invited to present their articles for review. Finance Committee will review all of the articles at that time so that they can make a determination as to what recommendations they will be making to the town.
Thank you. We'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion so moved.
Second?
All in favor? Unanimous?